What's up guys, welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. I'm your host Caleb. If you want to support me, you can now become a Patreon. Not only is it the best way to help out the channel, additionally you'll get more say in what decks I cover. Special shout out to all of my high contributing patrons. Newsome, you rock. Additionally, you can always use that TCGplayer link in the description down below if you want to help out the channel. Now let's get into today's Deck Tech with Riversong. And guys, today is the weekly voted patron build. Again, if you want to become a part of that, become a patron. Now let's get into what we did with this deck. It's going to be a scry tribal deck, and I know that sounds weird, but hey, let me cook. This is going to be able to shove all the cards we want on the bottom of our library to ensure we're drawing them. And then we're going to leave bombs on the top of our library, and this is going to be a polymorph deck. So we can easily set up the top of our library, and we're never going to draw into those bombs because, again, they're sitting on the top. So this will allow us to draw all of our impactful cards from the bottom, keeping our bombs on the top, and then we just polymorph our useless creatures into some massive bombs and win the game from there. So if you want to outvalue your opponent with this polymorph deck, let's get into it. Let's kick it off by talking about the elephant in the room, Time Stream Navigator. It's going to be extremely easy to get 10 permanents and start taking infinite extra turns. I just did not think that was okay for casual, so she will not be included in the deck, but I had to mention her. Let's talk about the bombs we get to run in this deck. Hullbreaker Horror. Every time this guy hits the battlefield, he just starts taking control of the game. Not to mention he's just massive. Atali Primal Storm. The goal of this deck is to set up the top of our library to start casting bombs, so he's going to fit perfectly in that strategy. Nero Wild Mage, another one that's going to fit perfectly in the strategy. It's also kind of broken because you do put that card on the bottom of your library, so if you still want to cast it, you will draw it next turn. Ancient Silver Dragon can draw us a ton of cards while just being a giant beater. We've got the Mothman himself. This guy can generate a ton of card advantage and just takes over the game very fastly. Nezahal, kind of the same thing, right? A big beater that takes control of the game and gives you insane card advantage. Ovika, not only is this going to be amazing for our fodder portion of the deck, additionally, this card can just create a board state very quickly. Niv Mizzet is another card that can easily start taking over the game. Additionally, he can go infinite. We do run Curiosity and Ophidian Eye in this deck just because it works kind of well with our commander. So not only is it good for our commander, but can go infinite with this guy. Now is probably a good time to mention we are also running Blightsteel Colossus. Not only is this going to be a solid shuffler, that way, you know, whenever we go infinite with Niv Mizzet, we will have a way to shuffle our graveyard back into our library. It's also just an 11/11 that one-shots people. Jin Kataxis, another card that can really start taking over the game. Not only are we going to double up on all of our polymorph effects, additionally, it's just going to slow our opponents down to a crawl. Utvara Hellkite. This is just one of those cards that left on the board can get out of control very quickly. 2 dragons, 4 dragons, 8 dragons, it's insane. Let's move on to those polymorph cards. Proteus Staff. Now 9 times out of 10 we will be sacrificing a token to this, but in a pinch we can easily just start sacrificing our creatures. It's going to go to the bottom of our library and then we will draw it. Not to mention, I bet this is probably annoying for our opponents. In a pinch we can just start removing their stuff. Polymorph and Transmogrify, just staples. Also, we do have Divergent Transformation. Remember, this is only going to cost 4 mana as long as we do have 3 opponents, so that's solid. Reality Scramble is going to be amazing in this deck. Once we get one of our insane draw engines on the battlefield, it's going to be very likely that we have a bunch of extra lands in our hand. So we're going to very easily be able to cast this multiple times a turn without worry. Chaos Warp, the classic. Not only is this solid removal, but again, it can work for us in this deck. Guff rewrites history, again, solid removal, while also working for the strategy. Moving on, let's talk about the fodder cards we run. We have Third Path Iconoclast, Young Pyromancer, and Talren Sky Summoner. Not only can they generate a decent board state, additionally, we're going to get that fodder that we need. Saheeli Sublime Artificer, Magnus the Red. Not only is this guy going to provide fodder, additionally, it's going to lower the cost of those instant and sorcery spells. Definitely going to be amazing in this deck. We also have Invasion of Segovia. You're going to get some solid fodder cards, and then once you flip this, you're going to give all of those expensive cards Convoke. So it's going to be very easy to start using our fodder to cast all of our non-creature spells. Additionally, I found some solid land cards that can generate some awesome fodder. That way we can start polymorphing early, and we can save some deck slots. Another thing that's going to be super important in this deck is setting up the top of our library. Palantir of Orthanc was made for this deck. We're going to scry a ton, set up the top of our library with those bombs, and if they don't let us draw cards, they're very likely going to be taking a ton of damage. Scroll Rack is amazing. It's going to take all of the bombs that are stuck in your hand and throw them to the top of our library, where again, we will not be drawing them because of our commander. Brainstorm and Dream Cache can easily take those bombs out of your hand and put them on top of your library, which is exactly what we need to do. The Reality Chip is actually some pretty solid tech in this deck. You're going to be able to have your cake and eat it too. You're going to draw from the bottom, but you'll be able to cast spells from the top. So you can set up your library for an advantageous Reality Chip turn while also getting card advantage from the bottom of your deck. It's going to be pretty solid. Netherese Puzzle Ward is going to be very solid for making sure we are setting up the top of our library with those bombs while giving you some incidental card advantage here and there. Rivendell, another land that can easily scry to every turn. That's going to be exactly what this deck wants to do. Mystic Speculation. I like this card here because of the buyback. It's going to be very easy to spend 3 mana. We're going to get some fodder off of that. It's going to come back to our hand, and we're going to be scrying to oblivion, setting up the top of our library, which is again exactly what this deck wants to do. Thassa's just a 3 mana scry 1 every turn. Aqueous Form, again, another way we can just scry 1 every turn. Crystal Ball, tap it, scry 2. Treasure Map. I've been loving Treasure Map in decks that can really utilize the treasure tokens, because early game it's going to scry, set up the top of our library, and then once it pops, it's actually going to give us the ability to cast our bombs straight up. Moving on, let's talk about the core of the deck. We do need Swiftfoot Boots and Lightning Greaves. Protecting our commander is kind of important because setting up the entire top of our library with bombs, then they kill our commander and we start drawing them, that is not what we want to do. Windfall is going to be super awesome just for that additional card draw. Ophidian Eye and Curiosity. Again, with this on our commander, it's kind of very meta dependent, right? If there's a lot of fetch lands in your meta, if there's a lot of green players that are constantly searching up lands, it's going to be very solid. But if your meta's kind of like, I run only basics, the green scene's not really there, it's not going to be that good. So very meta dependent, but in a lot of metas, throwing this on your commander can draw a ton of cards. Transplant Theorist kind of has 2 roles in the deck. One, whenever you're going off with Niv Mizzet, this is going to be a very easy way that we can put that Titan in the graveyard and reshuffle our library. Additionally, the recursion this gives you is insane. Imagine just putting your most broken card constantly on the bottom of your library and then redrawing into it, such as a Jeska's Will. It's so good, we're going to run 3 other cards in the deck that do the exact same thing, because again, Jeska's Will every turn consistently busted. Divergence Transformation every turn, again busted. This is going to be amazing in the deck. Ghost Quarters and Demolition Field are kind of cool tech in the deck. We can easily destroy those very impactful lands for our opponent while forcing them to take a lot of damage from our commander. Sneak Attack is also going to make an appearance in this deck. If those bombs get stuck in our hand, this is going to be a very easy way to get them out of our hand on the battlefield into our graveyard, and then we can easily use those cards that put cards from our graveyard into our library to get them again back into our hand, and we can just keep doing that, getting our bombs consistently taking over the game. Nanogen Conversion is going to win games, guys. If you're not on this card, you might need to be. This is going to be super solid to, again, just kill our opponents all in one turn. Let me set up a few scenarios for you. If we have a couple fodder on the battlefield and we turn everything into an Utvara Hellkite, boom, instant board state. Even turning everything into a Genkataxis and then casting a spell that gets copied a ton of times, busted. Blightsteel Colossus, everything's a Blightsteel Colossus. You really only need 3 to kill your opponents. Busted. This card is going to win games. Mizzet's Mastery is just a solid way to get our Polymorph cards back from our graveyard, our value cards back from our graveyard. It's just a very flexible card. Moving on to ramp, we are running Mana Geyser and Jeska's Will. These are just solid cards to ensure that we can easily be casting those bombs from our hand. Again, putting Mana Geyser on the bottom of our library every turn and recasting it, kinda busted. Especially if you have a consistent way to draw cards, you can easily cast it, put them on the bottom of your library, cast it again, and create pseudo infinite mana. Cursed Mirror is just going to be amazing in the deck. We have a lot of bombs we can copy with it. I've seen this come down and copy an Atali, and I'm running it in my decks that don't run a lot of other colors. Wayfarer's Bauble, Felwar's Stone, just some solid ramp. We are then running all 4 of the Signets, just some very consistent ramp, and then Soul Ring as always. Moving on to our interaction, we have Swan Song, An Offer You Can't Refuse, Arcane Denial, and Counterspell. Just some solid ways to make sure our game plan is getting off. Role Reversal. I really like this card because, hey, here's a 1/1 token, and I'll take your bomb. This can kind of be a way to get a card out of your opponent's hand as well, right? You get their bomb, and then they're like, oh shit, I have to remove that. Flood of Tears is going to be a solid board wipe in the deck. It's going to throw everything in everybody's hands, and then we're going to be able to throw one of our bombs, I don't know, a Blightsteel Colossus, onto the battlefield, ensuring that we are definitely in the lead. Chain Reactions, just a very mana efficient board wipe, and Blasphemous Act, same thing, 1 mana wipe the board. That's going to do it for the deck tech, guys. Remember, if you want to become a part of these Patreon voted builds, the link to the Patreon is in the description down below. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all my patrons. I couldn't do without you guys. You guys are amazing, and as always, I hope this helped you in your deck building endeavors. I will see you in the next one.